when I was driving home from the gym one day in a pouring thunderstorm. And as I pulled into my little road, I noticed two workers, two road cleaners, migrant workers, crouched under a really small cardboard sheet, trying not successfully at all to remain dry. And I drove past them thinking, oh, that's so sad. And then I stopped my car, put it into reverse, and came back. And I can speak Tamil, so I rolled down the windows and asked them if they'd get into my car. I'd take them home, which was just down the road, and they could stay dry there till the rain stopped. So they said, no, we're really wet and muddy and we'll soil your car. I said, never mind, I can wash my car, just get in. So I refused to budge till they did. So they got into my car. I took them home. They sat in our front porch. We gave them some hot coffee, something to eat. I gave them my husband's dry clothes to change into, gave them some money as well. And when the rain stopped and they were about to go, I decided to take a photograph to put it on Facebook to say that if employers of road cleaners send them out, then given that it can rain in Singapore at any time, they should at least give them a raincoat or an umbrella. So they said, will we get into trouble because you're going to put this up? I said, I don't even know your names. I don't know the name of the company you work for. But if you think you're going to get into trouble, here's my number. I'm a lawyer. Call me if anything happens. So they took my number and off they went. And I didn't hear from them for months. Until a Sunday, several weeks later, I was at NTUC shopping for groceries, and I got a call from the police to say that one of the two guys had tried to commit suicide the night before, and the only number he had with him was mine. And would I be willing to go to the police station and post bail of $2,000 for him? So I dropped the grocery cart and ran to the Jurong police station where they told me they'd moved him to the mental hospital. So I had to go to the mental hospital, which was very disturbing, and to see this man among all those patients. So it's a crime in Singapore if you've attempted to commit suicide. I mean, if you're successful, you're no longer around. But so there were police guarding the ward. And I went in and they allowed me to speak to this man. And I said, what happened? And he said he had been paid his wages for 3 months. He had loan sharks hounding his family back home. And he didn't know what else to do. So I said, look, I'm here. I'm going to take care of it. Don't do anything else foolish. So I came back out and spoke to those policemen guarding the ward and said, look, this guy is just a victim. He's not a criminal. And I said, you and I don't know what it's like to live on the edge of desperation where taking your life is a very real option. But this guy does. So you need to, go after the employer and not, be hounding this guy. So those police officers were, maybe young NS men. I mean, they couldn't understand what I was talking about. So I came back home and started, I sent an email to the commissioner of police for the whole of Singapore, and I kept sending that email every day for a week. And you wouldn't believe it, it worked. A week later, they dropped all charges against him. They got his employer to pay him all his back wages. And a month later, he was at my doorstep again, sort of a new man, thanking me for everything I'd done. His wife called me from India to thank me. And it was a moment that made me realize that I'd invested all of maybe about 2 to 3 hours in this entire episode. But for this man, it had changed his life. I mean, you've heard the saying, you can't change the world, but you can change the world for one person. And this was a very real demonstration of that to me. So I sort of kept going from there. And this picture you see over here was the next thing that happened, which also involved rain. I was dropping my son off at a tennis match, tennis training, and as I was driving out, I saw the men in the top picture, and you can guess what they're wearing in the rain. It was garbage bags, and I thought that was really sad. And meantime, their supervisor was standing far away with an umbrella in a sheltered area. He wasn't doing any work, but he was, dry twice over. And these men were with these black garbage bags. So I stopped my car and said, can you tell me the name of your company? There were cars already honking behind me, but I didn't, at that moment care too much about that. So they just lifted their bags, and I could tell the name of the company from the T-shirts they were wearing. So I just took a quick photo of it, came back home, Googled the name of the company, and called them. And I said to them, I have photos and I have videos of your people working in the rain wearing garbage bags. I didn't have any videos, but that was just a white lie I told them. And I said, I'm going to send this to the Straits Times. I'm going to post this on social media, and I'm going to send it to the MOM if you don't give them raincoats. So the guy at the other end of the phone did a very gracious thing. He slammed the phone down on me. So I didn't have time that day to carry out all my threats, but the next day when I went back to drop my son again for training, that's what I saw. So they'd given all the men brand new yellow raincoats and rain boots, and when they saw who it was in the car, they all came running to the car to thank me, and it was fantastic. So it sort of began that way. This whole session is about, the domino effect. It began that way, and a couple of these stories went viral on social media, and the Singapore Kindness Movement reached out to me and said, why don't you start something and we'll support you. And we met for coffee, and I had to come up with the name right then. And I'd heard the song It's Raining Men, I guess, some time back. So, hence the name It's Raining Raincoats. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but it stuck. And we've come a long way since then. So basically the idea is, if you know a little bit about migrant workers in Singapore, there are about 750,000 migrant workers, and I only do work for the male migrant workers, not the female domestic workers. And there are about 700,000 of them. And they are, paid, most of them are paid less than $800 a month. They live cramped in dormitories. They have to often wake up at 5 a.m. to make their trucks, which leave their dormitories at around 6, because about 50 of them share one toilet. So they have to queue up just to share a toilet and to have a shower. And then they are packed into trucks. You've seen them on the roads with no seatbelt, no cover sometimes. And then they get to work, where their food packets are left for them at 6 o'clock in the morning. And they often go putrid by the time they eat them at lunch. And this is not me saying it. This has been documented in a study done by NUS and published in the Straits Times. So they're fed putrid food. They're transported without safety regulations that apply to the rest of us. They're cramped in dormitories that sometimes breach all safety regulations, and they're very often underpaid or not paid at all. And the reason is that they are paid by cash usually, and if they're not given a salary, it's up to them to prove that they were underpaid. Now, how do you go and prove you weren't paid if it's a cash transaction? So there's a whole host of issues that apply to this whole constituency of men in Singapore, and about 200 of them die every year building these fabulous buildings that we go to eat in and work in and live in. So, a little compassion towards them goes a long way. So anyway, so the idea is also what we do is we try and integrate, we find bridges to build between our community and theirs. So in the international schools, this was a cricket match at UWC, where we had a team of migrant workers come and play with the school kids. And you can guess who won, although the migrant workers told me they'd send their B team because they didn't want to take somebody's head off with a cricket ball. And all the parents came, we had a picnic, and it was fantastic. And I'll just show you a few other examples of things we've done. And, we run sort of lots of initiatives throughout the year. So this one was a shoe shop who called us, and they said they had about 500 pairs of men's shoes to give to the migrant workers, but there was just a little problem. They were all not in pairs. So I said, no problem, send it over. And I had my kids come over and bring their friends. On a Sunday morning, they all sat around in our garage, sorted the shoes out, and we loaded them back up into the car, and we, drove out and gave it to the migrant workers. And this is another initiative that we run with schools. And if, those of you who are here at Tanglin Trust, if you can take it up with your lost and found department as well. So a lot of the schools started with UWC again. That's where my sons go. I'm usually in the lost and found rummaging for something that they've lost, in the last week. And I noticed all these water bottles. And I said, what do you do with these water bottles at the end of the school year? And they said, they weren't really sure. So I said, why don't you donate them to me, and I'll pass them to the migrant workers. And they said, yeah, that'll be great. So we've been collecting these water bottles every year. And one year it was really funny because they were building a new high school block at UWC during the summer. And so when I went to collect the water bottles, they loaded my car with 4 cartons. I drove 10 feet, stopped at the construction site, and they were delighted to have it. So, you take it from where it's excess and you give it to where it's needed. It was perfect and very sustainable. But we do this all year round, and now we've got lots of schools donating water bottles to us. And this is the Starbucks food redistribution, which we run now year-round, twice a week, 52 weeks of the year. It's been going on for 2 years. This, again, started with a tennis story. I was at my son's school for a tennis tournament, and it was 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. And I went over to Starbucks to get some cold coffees for the other parents. And I noticed a huge tray of pastries and muffins and things kept outside the freezer. And I said, are you going to throw that away? It was closing time at 4 because it was a university Starbucks. So they said, yes. So I said, why don't you, give it to me? I just saw some road workers, some migrant workers outside doing road works. So they said, fine, very sweetly put it into bags, gave it to me. Took it over, gave it to the workers. They just sat down on the road. They must have been so hungry, they were munching, they were eating these things. And I took some photos of that and put it on Facebook. And again, it went viral. And, it was picked up by the Straits Times and seen by hundreds of thousands of people. Some people thought it was Starbucks that had done this. So they said, we'd stopped patronizing Starbucks, but we're going to go back now. So I got an idea. So I wrote to Starbucks saying, you got so much goodwill out of this. It cost you $0. You were going to throw that food away. Why don't you do this on a regular basis? Starbucks Singapore, no response. So I wrote to the worldwide CEO, Howard Schultz, and I said, this is what has happened. This is the reaction. Why don't you do something? I'd actually broken my foot at that time, a few days after that, so I was laid up in bed. The very next Monday, a Starbucks team lands up at my house with Starbucks coffees to discuss this with me. And today we do it with about 50 Starbucks outlets every week. So that's an ongoing initiative that we've got. And these are things we did very recently. We organized a giant potluck in Singapore earlier on this year. One of the ministers came with food as well to give to the migrant workers. We had people baking pastries and making pesto pasta and chicken rice and all kinds of things. And it was a nationwide potluck for the migrant workers. It was a huge success. We fed about 5,000 migrant workers. And alongside, we also did a sort of a free cycling. So we had people donate clothes and backpacks and caps and sunglasses and things from their house that were, not needed or not used anymore. And we distributed all of that free to the migrant workers. It was a huge success. And just 2 weeks ago, or last week, I guess, for Deepavali, we did lots and lots of different initiatives, but one of it went viral. And, I was on the radio earlier on this week and on Channel News Asia and so on, but it was a pizza distribution. So we had people donate pizzas, and we drove around Singapore distributing about 200 pizzas to migrant workers, and it was just so well received, and it's something we do every year during this festive time. And, so I was saying that we've come a long way. When I started this, I was a PR. I've just become a Singaporean as of 2 days ago. But people said, you're going to get kicked out of Singapore for doing this because, this is not a glamorous cause. And, the Little India riots had happened. And, so I said, well, if they do kick me out, I'll go. Because I'm not going to live in a place where you have to be scared to do something compassionate. And, fast forward to 3 years later, last year we won the President's Award for Philanthropy and Volunteerism. We've won a lot of other awards from different ministries. I have a fantastic working relationship with the MOM and different ministers. And there's a Minister, Grace Fu, who gave me an award some 3 years ago, had invited me to a gala dinner last year, and it was at I think the International Women's Forum gala dinner at the Fullerton. And when you receive an invite from a minister, you show up. So that's what I did. And during the talk, she told my story about how things had started. So the message I guess I want to convey is that if you believe in something good and you do it, there's really no need to. Sometimes we sort of go into paralysis by analysis. So it's just do it. And as long as you're not harming anyone, Singapore is definitely not a place where you need to be scared to do something good. I'm almost running out of time, so I'll end with this, which we launched yesterday. And we're talking about, a domino effect, so I'd like to see that in action. So this is Be a Santa Claus for our migrant workers this Christmas. So we're calling for people to pack little gifts. It could be a tiger balm, it could be a cap, it could be anything small that they can use. And if you PM the page, the Facebook page of It's Raining Raincoats, we'll send you drop-off locations. You can drop off the gifts. And our dream, Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. Our dream is that all of the 700,000 migrant workers will have a little gift this Christmas. So thank you for listening. Look up the page, connect with us, and please let me see this domino effect in action. So I hope you'll see this poster on our Facebook page and take it away and do more with it. Thank you so much.